All right, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad Salman Hanif, and I'm your host for this session, hosted by Stacks Pakistan. Welcome to episode 3. Episode 3 is about discussing the legality of cryptocurrency in Pakistan. So, I have two guests with me here today. I'll start by introducing our first guest. Barrister Ahmed Uzair. He is a UK qualified lawyer. He's a partner at AUC Law, and his areas of interest include investment law, technology related challenges, and cross border transactions. Over the years, he has worked with incubators, startups, VCs, and angel investors. He has also worked with Securities Regulator of Pakistan, SECP, regarding startup focused changes to companies' law and regulations. He assisted the SECP in equity crowdfunding regulations. He routinely writes and has published papers and articles in The Nation, Pakistan, and the Council magazine, Karachi, and Pakistan Law Digest. He is also the co-author of a book titled Alternative Dispute Resolution Review, published by Law Business Research, London. He is a fellow at the Continuing Legal Education Initiative of Pakistan, which aims to raise the overall standard of the legal profession. He regularly lectures on technology law. He can be reached at uzair@auclaw.com. Our second guest is Mr. Altaf Qureshi. Mr. Altaf Qureshi is a partner at Ijaz Ahmed and Associates in Karachi, primarily advising foreign clients investing in Pakistan. He is also CEO and co-founder of document automation startup Vukala and electronic signature platform PakSign. He is in English. He is in English law, having previously practiced with leading barristers, law firms, and banks in the U.S., London, and Abu Dhabi. Welcome to the third episode, honorable guests. So, as we usually do, we dive right into the subject. Let's start off with the legal definition of like how the state bank defines cryptocurrency in Pakistan. Mr. Altaf, why don't you start off?
Sure. There isn't much in terms of understanding what the definition is because we only have a circular from 2018, and the circular was principally designed to just ban it. It only uses the terms virtual currencies and tokens, and then just makes references to things like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Parkcoin, OneCoin, Dascoin, Pay Diamond, or ICOs. So in effect, they're not entirely clear what they mean by a virtual currency or a crypto. This SACP has issued a position paper to explore this a little bit more, to invite consultation, but that's still ongoing. So we don't know where we're going to end up in terms of an actual definition.
Right. Mr. Uzair, I think there's some problem with the connection. Are you there?
He's unfortunately having
Yeah, I
internet
think he's
issues.
having. I think he's having connection issues. So I think let's start off with the first discussion that, first ever legal discussion that in Pakistan we had about crypto. I think that was in 2018, where State Bank actually issued a circular regarding cryptocurrencies and what legal status they held in Pakistan. So, could you explain to us what was in that circular and what were the consequences or the legal implications attached with that circular?
So let me be very, very clear, first of all. The state bank only regulates banks, microfinance banks,
Right.
conventional banks, Islamic banks, and certain payment system operators, payment providers, etc. So that circular only applies upon them. It doesn't apply upon you and me. It is designed to prevent us from using the formal banking system when it comes to virtual currencies or crypto, as they consider it. Now, the actual circular has a number of adverbs that it uses. So it says refrain from processing, using, trading, holding, transferring value, promoting, and investing in virtual currencies. Now, those restrictions apply upon the banks, but by applying on the banks, they obviously apply upon us. Now, what that means, unfortunately, is you can't pretty much do anything with the formal banking system involving crypto. But it also includes, for example, the words transferring value. And I've already advised a foreign client about this, that unfortunately what that means is that if I buy crypto in Singapore or crypto in London and then convert it into pounds or convert it into dollars, I can't even get the proceeds of those pounds and dollars in Pakistan because they were transferring value associated with that Bitcoin. And so you've blocked it in every possible way. Then you add the money laundering laws and you add the foreign exchange laws, and all of a sudden, all doors effectively become closed.
Welcome back, Mr. Uzair. So you missed our first question. The first question was about the legal definition of crypto in Pakistan. Like when I say legal definition, I mean the definition used by government institutions for this particular method of transfer of value or the store of it.
Yeah, so I was able to listen to what Altaf said, and I am going to endorse completely what he said. The reference to the circular from 2018 is indeed the case as far as the State Bank is concerned. But I would like to take maybe a step back and talk about what the SECP has done on this side, on the as far as blockchain and DLT is concerned. So. And I've been fortunate enough to have multiple conversations with the SECP on the subject, and there is definitely an interest there. And I think
Uzair sir, we're losing you. There's some distortion on your end. Yeah. So
currency, and as far as the SECP is concerned, it is also looking at the technology which is behind crypto, i.e. blockchain and DLT, and identifying use cases around that. So my take on this is that since this is the future, there is definitely an interest as far as RegTech is concerned in the SECP, and there is definitely some level of acceptance compared to, let's say, 2018 as far as the State Bank is concerned. And and it's hopeful that they'll probably be innovative in the way that they have been in other areas of fintech. They are going to be quite aggressive and I should say progressive around cryptocurrency as well.
So yeah, we do see that, like given that now, like a committee for Punjab is also in process. The formation of a committee for regulating cryptocurrency in Punjab is also in process, and there is already a committee in KPK. So yes, I see that they are aggressive as well as progressive. But what benefit does Pakistan have as a country to accept, the wide use of cryptocurrencies here? Like, what benefit would we have economically, socially, for our people to jump on this bandwagon?
Sure. So there is going to be two sides to this, right? There is the question around crypto being an asset class, being something of a legal tender, right? So as far as the use cases are concerned, it is now well documented and well understood that centralized currencies and central as it having any negativity that we are
please
taking a
repeat the
leap
last
in
couple of
this
sentences
area.
because there was a distortion, so we missed out on those.
No worries. So I feel that there is a certain amount of positivity that should be conveyed around it, and I think it's rather simplistic to think of them as simply being an asset class where you invest. As far as the technologies are concerned, and as far as the use cases of cryptocurrencies are concerned, they are wide and they have wide applications. And therefore, I feel that we as we being one of we are in terms of volume a huge economy. Our size is relatively small to the Western world, but in terms of in terms of our age and in terms of the number of the population that we have, I think our younger generation will be able to benefit a lot of the potential that cryptocurrencies have, not just as a currency, but also as an asset class, also as a technology and various applications around RegTech.
Right, Altaf, so what do you have to say about the subject?
Gee, no, I completely endorse what Ahmed is saying, but I think I would give you two practical examples, one from my own world and one that obviously we're all reading about. From my own world, we have an electronic signature platform called ParkSign, and we have explored putting aspects of ParkSign on blockchain, not only because it is effective for the market and for technology reasons, etc. Now, the problem is that immediately when you start looking at blockchain, you have two options, public and private. And private blockchain is extremely expensive and extremely cumbersome to maintain, which makes it therefore, a dead end for me as a cost-effective solution. So I have to think about public blockchain. The moment I look at public blockchain, then I enter the world of Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin, etc. So if there's a ban on that crypto, I actually can't utilize the technology. So is what Ahmed's point is. So I can completely understand why the SECP wants to enable the technology, because there's a regulatory benefit associated with it. But we are stuck again at having the state bank, asking them to potentially provide us a regulatory framework that works, because the Punjab government can't do it, the KPK government can't do it, the SECP can't do it. It is still the domain of the state bank. And in this regard, I find what El Salvador has done very, very appealing. In fact, I was reading about it just today. And as Ahmed has pointed out very rightly, it is a debate between whether it's an asset or a legal tender. So basically the difference between owning a car, owning a house, owning gold versus something that I can use to buy and sell, an actual currency equivalent. And what
So
El
is it a method
Salvador
of transfer or a store of value, basically?
Exactly. And what El Salvador has done is very, very nuanced and quite simple, which is that if I can pay for something in US dollars or in Pakistan rupees, why can't I also pay for it in Bitcoin? It only requires a government to say, I accept Bitcoin as a currency. And so from that perspective, it actually already works with Pakistan's regulatory system. And so that is very appealing in my mind, because you're opening yourself to a lot of innovation and possibilities and entrepreneurship that currently you have pretty much blocked. But this is something that you could watch, you can regulate, you can monitor, you can track, and still enable.
So I get. So generally, the question that's asked is, yes, cryptocurrencies are traceable, right? Given that that there is like a deposit address that you are sending it out to, but then again, that deposit address is anonymous, and like whenever there is a transaction of rupees, the state bank sort of knows what's happening. But that wouldn't be the case if it's Bitcoin or if it's any other cryptocurrencies. Then again, the exchange would be the mediating authority. So unless the rupees are being handed hand to hand, that would be a different case. I'm comparing this to bank transfers.
Right. I mean, if we look at what El Salvador has done, firstly, they pegged Bitcoin to the US dollar. So there's actually a fixed exchange rate associated with it. People still complain because, of course, Bitcoin can be volatile versus US dollar. But that's not to say that Bitcoin can't be, stable at some point in the future. What El Salvador also did was engage a company called Strike. And there are already countries like Paraguay and some Caribbean countries that are talking to PayPal. Why can't Pakistan talk to, for example, Coinbase? Coinbase is a $50 billion app that is regulated in the US, all aspects of anti-money laundering, all aspects of KYC. It does business with JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Citibank, Standard Chartered. Why can't Pakistan utilize that same platform, that same system? And therefore, you've got a fully enabled solution that meets regulatory standards and all these anti-money laundering concerns, but also facilitates actual Bitcoin.
Right. So, using El Salvador's example, what they've done is they've pegged Bitcoin to US dollar rate. So technically, then again, aren't you using US dollars? Like, if you want to avoid the volatility of Bitcoin, or have they fixed one rate? For example, let's say one Bitcoin is just 30,000 US dollars, and that is it.
No, they haven't fixed the rate. What they've done is they fixed it to a currency that they already recognize. The US dollar is actually one of the official currencies of El Salvador, not the case in Pakistan. So
Yeah.
we would theoretically peg it against the Pakistan rupee. But what is El Salvador saying? El Salvador saying, bring Bitcoin and buy land, we will accept it. Pay your taxes, we will accept it. Pay for goods and services, we will accept it. We already do this when we have to ask about when we receive money in dollars and receive money in pounds and yen. So why is Bitcoin a different from another currency, for example?
Yeah, I guess so. What they're essentially doing is using the advantages of Bitcoin as a method of transfer, while
Yeah.
using the dollar's importance as the store of value to
Yeah.
avoid volatility. Yet again, gain advantage from the method, from the
Yes,
system.
and I'm very curious to know what Ahmed thinks about all of this as well, because he's very close
Yeah,
to some of the regulators in this regard. But there's one thing that I'm particularly keen on is that if it's not an asset, you also have very easy tax issues, you have very easy accounting issues, because you treat it like a currency. Like I have a dollar account with dollars in it. It's a simple accounting feature and a simple tax issue. So that's
Yeah.
why I found the El Salvador solution quite refined and appropriate for a country like Pakistan. I don't know if Ahmed agrees.
yes, Uzair sir, all over to you.
No, so I personally, I think Altaf, the jury's still out as to whether there is enough of a acknowledgement of these currencies as legal tender. Because what I see at the moment is that a vast majority of people, and Salman, as we were discussing offline, a lot of your friends, people are looking to invest in Bitcoin. Now, you don't invest in legal tenders typically, right? So legal tender
Yeah,
is something that you use for transactions. And I think the conversation around the environmental impact of the cost of maintaining these maintaining the currencies is something that is also affecting its adoption as legal tender. Every transaction has cost in terms of the amount of energy that is required to process that transaction. And so personally, I feel that the jury is out on whether there is a there is a particular currency out there that can be used as legal tender, which is what El Salvador is trying to undertake. I think El Salvador is probably a unique case because, as you rightly pointed out, they have multiple currencies as legal tender, which is not the case in Pakistan. You go out and you try to pay for a meal with a US dollar, you're going to get looks, right? Because our
but
government
they'll be
doesn't
happy to
recognize.
accept it. I tell you.
Right? No, but
That's the point, right?
so and tried. I know what you're saying, right? So in fact, if you want to go there, I know for a fact that on the Iranian border, a lot of transactions happen with Iranian currency, and if you look at the extreme north around GB, a lot of transactions happen with Chinese currency. So I know that, but those are not practical. Wide enough examples of where you can say that look, we can have multiple tenders and multiple legal tenders, because in order for this to be functional, you need to have a certain amount of dependability, a certain amount of reliability, and certain amount of wide circulation. You can't have 10 out of 10,000 vendors or customers accepting a particular legal tender, and which is basically 0.1%, right? So if you want to do this, then there has to be a whole host of actions that need to happen. How would the legal tender be exchanged? How would it be stored? How would it be processed? And I think that is why El Salvador cannot be imported here in Pakistan, because they had that precedent of having multiple legal tenders.
I think we've digressed a bit. Please, sorry to cut you off, Altasif. Please continue.
Sure.
No, I was going to say, I mean, just to put a counter to what Ahmed is saying. I mean, I accept all that. I mean, there's no denying that. However, I think there are ways in which each of those issues can be uniquely addressed in Pakistan. For example, the El Salvador bill was not introduced out of the blue. In fact, was an experiment where a certain part of El Salvador was used as a pilot project, where apps were distributed, training was delivered, machines were installed, vendors were, explained as to how to accept it, etc. And based around the success of that project and that technology and the central bank's monitoring and the funds flow and the tracking of individuals who are involved in this, it actually not only led to the confidence of the central bank, it led to the confidence of their parliament eventually. So we would have to do something similar. And I'm not even thinking that, Pakistan is not going to achieve this anytime soon. So by the time we even start thinking about this, 3 to 6 months will pass, and by which point the whole world will have learned from El Salvador. So we're going to have the benefit of time regardless.
Yeah.
With respect to energy, what was interesting is that apparently El Salvador has one of the largest geothermal reserves of power in the world. So they're actually going towards a zero carbon neutral mining environment for Bitcoin and blockchain. And the irony of it is, we have KPK doing that with renewable hydro energy, and we want to shift towards solar energy across the country as it is. So it kind of makes a lot of sense if you have a system of currency that also facilitates your transition in energy sources. Taking the burden away from coal and nuclear and everything else that is extremely expensive. So, there are ways to resolve this, but yes, it takes centralized planning, it takes centralized will, and it needs that level of customization and transition for a market and economy like Pakistan.
But it also requires a lot of faith for a country to give up its own system and its own control just to go towards an international, not even international, towards a decentralized system. And when I say decentralized, I say that in inverted commas, because technically there is centralization, given that a huge quantity of every cryptocurrency is held by some unknown addresses, but most of it is coagulated in one spot. When I say one spot, I mean, let's say 10 or 20 or 25, 30 top addresses will have 30 or 40 or 15% minimal holdings of the total system. And that means that you're sort of putting yourself as a country and your citizens up for manipulation and asset devaluation in any case.
I mean, I'm not sure I take that view, because you're not necessarily undermining your system. I mean, you currently accept dollars in the country, at least for foreign remittance purposes. The fact that the state bank mandatorily converts it into rupee and gives you rupee is just a function of our foreign exchange regime. But we already recognize multiple currencies. We already recognize the world's trade. What I fear, and I'm being as genuine as I can be about this, what I fear is that we will have faith when 20 other countries have already done this. And if that happens, we've actually missed the boat, because those 20 other countries will have learned, have progressed, have innovated, have transformed their economies, by which point we've actually then understood what we should have done. Now, keep in mind that the founder of Infosys in India, who sits on multiple panels and committees of the Indian government, including the UPI, the United Payments Interface, Aadhaar that they introduced, is now asking for a committee on introducing Bitcoin as legal tender and an asset class. Now, if they can have that open conversation, and they might lead on this front, then suddenly we will have faith. I mean, what does that mean? Why can't we be the first to undertake this?
I think sorry if you were going to say something with that. Basically, I think we've digressed a bit. I think we really need to discuss what is the current status of cryptocurrency in Pakistan, because like as I mentioned earlier and as Zair have discussed earlier, there's a lot of questioning about what's going on. There's a lot of gray area, and how as individuals supposed, like how are we supposed to accept or move around in that gray area? Should I, let's say, I open up a Binance account or any other exchange? Should I use my credit card to buy Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, or can I buy it off my friend locally? And like, which processes are legal? If I want to set up a mining rig, should I do that or not? Is it legal or not? Like, what interpretation is the state bank and the government institutions? What is their interpretation? वो क्या समझते हैं कि भाई क्या लीगल है क्या नहीं है? इस वक्त इसकी करंट स्टेटस जो है, मेरे ख्याल से वो डिस्कस करना बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है टू, मतलब अगर हमने उसको जनरल पब्लिक में लेकर आना है, तो जनरल पब्लिक को एक चीज़ की अंडरस्टैंडिंग होनी चाहिए उससे पहले कि वो एक वाइडली इम्प्लीमेंटेड सिस्टम हो जाए.
Ahmed, you want to take that one first?
I agree, Salman. So yeah, sure. So and Salman, I'm sad to say that there isn't a lot of black and white I'm able to give you as far as your questions are concerned. So let me if you allow, talk about the gray area, right?
Yeah, please.
So and so essentially there is a law which I know that Altaf will also be discussing. It's called Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1947. It talks about the authorized dealers, which are basically the entities allowed to exchange one legal tender with another. If you want to convert currency, you have to do it through them. And there is a whole host of regulations around that has been promulgated by the state bank from time to time. As far as the current state of affairs is concerned, I don't see any specific criminalization of cryptocurrency as we have seen in some other countries. So let's, as far as the complete black is concerned, I don't see that criminalization, and I don't see that as such there. There are obviously some laws which have been used by other countries as well, like for example the AML CFT regulations. There has been a lot of interest around the misuse of cryptocurrencies, and therefore the AML CFT laws have been used for a lot of enforcements that have happened in other countries. And I suspect if our government would ever want to take legal action, it will probably be using similar laws. So there are so AML CFT. Then there is the FIA, which is the Federal Investigative Agency. It has certain purview around cyber laws, and that is the second main legal legislative structure that's there. The main law that relates to this is called Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act 2016. And again, there is absolutely no discussion around cryptocurrencies, but there are certain criminal provisions relating to misuse of computer systems, etc. And therefore, again, I feel that if there was a aggressive legal action in those against crypto,
Sorry, as I said, we couldn't hear your last sentence. There was a bit of a distortion. So you said if there was any major legal action against crypto.
Yeah, so the government will probably be using the AML CFT law or the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act. But Altaf, happy to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, no, I completely endorse what you're saying. And I think, let me put my neck out a little bit and see if I could translate that into a practical piece of advice, although I acknowledge that it could be a bit gray at every stage. But it is not illegal to download the Binance app, number one.
Okay. Step one.
Step one. Paying for a cryptocurrency with your credit card or debit card, that's a no-no, because that would be contrary to the circular, because you're using the formal banking system, which is what the state bank regulates, and so you can't use your credit card and debit card to pay for it. Okay.
So a question regarding that before we proceed further, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So the question is, according to the circular, so so I'm not a lawyer, so as a layman's understanding, it says the state bank would not back any cryptocurrency transaction, and would not enforce the contracts that were used that were built upon it, let's say.
Right.
So if the bank has facilitated your transaction and allowed you to buy cryptocurrency through its credit card from Binance, then you as an individual are no longer responsible, because it was the institution that conducted and facilitated the transaction.
But that's exactly the problem. Which institution allows you to buy cryptocurrency using their credit or debit card or bank account? In Pakistan, there's none. And in most jurisdictions around the world, there are mostly no banks that allow this. Some jurisdictions and some banks are slowly opening up to this. A big leader, in fact, is the US, where big banks like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Standard Chartered are all starting to facilitate this. They're even investing their own bank-owned funds into such cryptocurrency. So
the question is, let's say I buy cryptocurrency from using my debit card or my credit card, because I know people who've used their credit card and debit card from Pakistan and bought US dollar tether from Binance. So क्या मुझे expect करना चाहिए कि GFI मेरे दरवाजे के बाहर खड़ी होगी कि आपने cryptocurrency खरीदी है?
What you should expect is the possibility that they close your bank account or they cancel your card, because they're not going to allow themselves to be used to purchase something that their regulator says you cannot purchase. So it's not a criminal act in of itself. It's an act that's not permitted pursuant to the state bank. Okay. Now, let's say that I use currency, actual rupees, dollars, pounds, whatever the case may be. Now we start to get into a bit more complicated area, because if I said that my friend in London or New York or Sydney or Hong Kong, he's the one or she's the one that bought the crypto on Binance for me, the first question arises, how did I send my money to those people? And if I had used one of the bank accounts, credit cards, debit cards, formal banking system, that theoretically again falls under the state bank purview for the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act that Ahmed was referring to earlier.
So once again, not a criminal offense, but a negligence on part of the bank.
No, it's that the banks are not permitted to facilitate you. So it's the banks again who are not allowed to enable you to do it. There's some debate around this, because as Ahmed we discussed offline, is that there is another act that can potentially allow you to do it. But at this present moment, the state bank is quite strict around this, because they want to prevent foreign exchange leaving the country like that. Now, the next problem becomes, if I did send 1,000 rupees to Salman to deposit in Binance, where did I get my 1,000 rupees from? Did I submit tax return for it? That's an issue there. Was that involved in some terrorist activity? Counter-financing becomes an issue there. Was that involved in some criminal activity? That becomes an anti-money laundering. So the source of funds, the source of my business, that suddenly starts to become an issue. But that is an issue whether or not you're talking about cryptocurrency or anything else. That could be an issue in normal currency, normal bank accounts, normal daily activities. So that's not unique to cryptocurrency.
So, Ahmed Sahab, our next question is from you. What if I buy it locally? Let's say I have 10,000 rupees and my friend here in Lahore has, let's say, is willing to give me 75 USDT for it. So I give him my money,
Yeah.
whether by cash or by bank transfer, and say, okay, transfer it to my Binance account. Now, what is the legality of the
Yeah.
situation here?
So that's definitely illegal. There used to be a certain amount of gray area around it, whether you could sell your foreign currency to somebody against PKR. But in December 2020, the State Bank came out with a circular around foreign currency. As you know, current regime of the State Bank has been very particular about protecting their foreign exchange reserves, and the regime essentially bars somebody from converting foreign currency privately. So you are required to you can keep your foreign currency. You are allowed under the current laws to have your foreign currency account as an individual. You go to a bank and you say कि मुझे USD का account open करना है, तो आप USD का account open कर सकते हैं. Or you can fund that account by buying foreign currency from an authorized dealer. The only restriction that was imposed in the December 2020 circular was that you need to be a tax filer. So as long as you're a tax filer, you can go to an authorized dealer and purchase foreign currency, and that's fine. इसीलिए वो अब आपसे आपका CNIC लेते हैं अगर आप USD लेने जाएंगे. You can fund your USD account, but what you can't do is enter into private foreign currency sale purchase transactions, because that's not allowed.
Okay, so अगर मैं किसी मनी एक्सचेंजर के पास जाऊं और उनसे बिटकॉइन खरीदूं पाकिस्तानी रुपए देके.
No. So आप USD ले सकते हैं ना. Let's filter this out, Salman. So okay. you can buy USD. You can send USD abroad, provided you have a foreign currency account in your own name. और अपने USD account से अगर आप खरीदना चाहते हैं तो आप खरीद लें.
ठीक हो गया. But not from Pakistani rupees, from a local person. आप इस तरह cryptocurrency की transaction नहीं कर सकते.
नहीं. So there is no law. I think we have come to this conclusion now that there is no law that specifically says कि आप crypto नहीं ले सकते. But what is clear is कि इस तरह की foreign currency transactions नहीं allowed. There are other restrictions which basically mean that you can't go to somebody and say कि यार ये लो maybe it's 50 lakh ये लो 50 lakh रुपए and I'll buy one Bitcoin from you, right? So that's not a transaction that's permitted under the law. So yeah, let me put it this way: there is no green channel for this transaction. Right. Somebody does it and there is no record of it. It's unlikely anybody is going to find out.
Right. So next question I think is addressed to both of you. हमने पिछले कुछ दिनों पहले देखा था कि जहाँ पे न्यूज़ पे खबरें आती थी कि जी ये फलाने लोग इनका माइनिंग सेटअप लगा हुआ था और ये पकड़े गए, and you would see them in handcuffs, and साथ ऑफिशियल्स खड़े होते थे कि जी पता नहीं क्या यहाँ पे टॉप सीक्रेट लाइक डेंजरस मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग वाला काम हो रहा है कि माइनिंग सेटअप लगा हुआ है, और आपको FIA मतलब छापे मारते हुए भी नजर आती थी. और अब आपको लोग अक्सर खुले अपने माइनिंग सेटअप्स आपको यूट्यूब पे दिखा रहे होते हैं या बोस्ट ऑफ कर रहे होते हैं जी मेरे इतनी रिस्क का सेटअप है, एंड यू डोंट सी FIA एनीमोर चेसिंग आफ्टर देम. तो व्हाट्स बिहाइंड द चेंज? इज इट दैट केस इन सिंध, द सिंध हाई कोर्ट्स डिसीजन, और क्या उसकी implications क्या है?
Ahmed, do you want to take that?
Sure. So obviously there is a certain amount of acceptance. I think हमने अभी already ये discuss कर लिया, right? कि the immediate perception and the original perception around crypto was that this is basically black money. This is basically money laundering. There are people who criminal organized crime that is behind it. Now the view is very different. There is a certain amount of acceptance. There are institutional investors coming in. There are pension funds who are starting to look at look at these cryptocurrencies as a storer of value, for example, and therefore there is a certain amount of acknowledgement and recognition around the asset. And therefore there is a certain amount of acceptance as far as our regulators are concerned as well. आप देखें कि FIA has typically been very aggressive in the last 20 years around all the things to do with cyber crimes, whether that is the great traffic. There has been a very proactive approach by the FIA to prevent or limit great traffic in Pakistan. There has been a lot of legal action taken by the FIA against a lot of these ransomware and other criminal activities that were happening from Pakistan. हम जितनी भी अगर आप सोशल मीडिया पे वीडियोस देखते हैं of these hackers in America, तो वो typically हमारी neighboring country में कि वो लोग होते हैं call center के, and you get less of these in Pakistan, relatively speaking. This is because our law enforcement agencies have been very aggressive to nip any kind of criminal activity under the bud as far as the cyber crime is concerned. Obviously, it's not perfect. There is criminal activity going on, and therefore, I feel that as far as the law enforcement is concerned, there is a certain amount of acceptability around it. I think that's the only explanation I have.
So what you're saying is that case in Sindh is not being used as a precedent, but ये है कि the government is just quiet, seeing that there are benefits to cryptocurrency. So the government is not, institutions are not enforcing existing mechanisms.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I agree with what Ahmed is saying, but I think he's also saying the same. You're still left confused, because where is the black letter of the law that allows the FIA to arrest me in the first place, right? Or prevent me from doing mining? And then suddenly the perception changes. Bitcoin is worth $2 trillion. The whole world is becoming blockchain crazy. And so now the perception changes. I mean, that's not fair on any of us, right? I mean, we should have clear black letter law regulations around this. And what makes it even more confusing is when the KPK government suddenly feels that it's a provincial subject and says that we want to attract mining companies, mining rigs, mining investment around our renewable energy projects. So I'm also left confused, because that sounds like
is it a provincial subject? I don't think
so.
Well,
not that I'm aware of. I mean, I don't know, Ahmed, if you've seen anything, but not that I know of. But मेरा मतलब ये कि if I go to Peshawar, ठीक है, लेकिन कराची बैठ के नहीं कर सकता हूँ. I mean,
it's definitely not a provincial. Sorry to cut you. So I don't think this is a provincial subject. Cyber crimes are obviously FIA's domain, and FIA does not it's a federal agency. So that's very clear that it's a if there is going to be any legislation around it, it is going to be at the federal level.
Agreed. But you have the KPK government actively almost challenging the federal government कि भाई मैं क्यों नहीं कर सकता हूँ और मैं क्यों नहीं लोगों को बुला सकता हूँ करवाने के लिए. So it leaves one confused, frankly speaking, and I understand that's why we're having this discussion, but it's frustrating that you can't give a definitive answer.
So my questions are generally for the average person, and we've invited you as our legal experts to give us some guidance as to what to do, because as I've mentioned previously, there are a lot of people, especially from the younger generation between 15 to 40, who want to get into this and who want to work on blockchain development and all of this, mining and how to expand their own income and understand the whole system. But they're not able to, or they're just not sure आज अभी ये ग्रे के अंदर है, या कुछ लोग कहते हैं जी लीगल है, कोई मसला ही नहीं है, कुछ लोग कहते हैं जी बिल्कुल इलीगल है, और गवर्नमेंट इंस्टीट्यूशंस कल क्या करती हैं कि कुछ पता नहीं है। तो एक आम बंदे को इसमें एंटर होना चाहिए कि नहीं होना चाहिए एट दिस पॉइंट इन टाइम? एज व्हेन आई से दिस, आई डोंट मीन फॉर द नेशनल पर्सपेक्टिव, मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि मेरे लिए, मेरी इंडिविजुअल सेफ्टी के लिए, क्या इसमें एंटर होने के बाद इज इट ओके लीगली?
So I think this is a difficult question to answer, right? So we as lawyers try, when somebody asks us कि जी हमें आप legal advice दें, is there a, is this contemplated activity barred under the law? The answer to that we have discussed right now is that it is not. I mean, there is no legal bar, and there is absolutely enough that we have in terms of legal precedent as well, i.e. the Sindh High Court judgment, that there is now some level of protection, right? So if somebody says that, look, Uzair, I want to take your legal advice, and I want to do this, I'll probably be advising him certain safeguards around the legal structure, but I won't say to him कि तुम ना करो,
With around being
just
the
because.
keyword.
Yeah, exactly. So and the reason is that based on that individual circumstances, if I don't have any legal provision or a letter of the law that says that this activity is not allowed, I cannot in good conscience give him a legal opinion to say that it is not allowed. I will obviously be advising him around the safeguards that he needs to put in place to make sure that he does not fall foul of, for example, the anti-money laundering laws. I would like to, and we have done that, right? So we have advised people not to take steps that which would fall foul under the AML CFT laws, and otherwise it's good, it's fine, right? So as long as the legal coverage is there, there are safeguards in place, and considering the precedent that we have, I'm not going to say to somebody that you can't do it.
Right. So next question is once again addressed to both of you. Is
No, but
legal?
I really would want Altaf to chime into it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I think it might help to be specific as to what I think we're talking about in terms of what activity. So, can you be a blockchain developer? Absolutely, and encourage it.
Yeah.
Be a global blockchain developer. Can you be a crypto-based developer or be involved in the international crypto arena, market, jobs? Yes, why not? Absolutely. I don't see why any of that is illegal as such. Can you get paid or pay with crypto as part of your job, as part of your relationship with a company abroad or a company even Pakistan? That's when it starts to get gray, and I probably would say not recommended if you don't want to potentially fall foul of something or where you might lose money in at some point or time. If you say no, I want to set up an entire Bitcoin company, a blockchain company, get into full commercial activity wherever I can find it in Pakistan, yes, unfortunately we are not there yet. And I don't know many jurisdictions in the world where you can truly do that completely. But that is rapidly changing. I mean, the news comes out every day, every week. So, while you're learning, while you're studying, while you're gaining experience, within 6 months or a year, the whole environment could be very different.
Right. So I guess we can take a little pause for the azan in the background, if you can hear it. I think a 2-minute pause. Okay. So I guess let's continue then. So my next question was basically a continuation of this one, which was about money laundering. Like, what is the legal definition, like in its briefest sense? So we only have like 9 minutes left. So, in like really brief definition of money laundering and how cryptocurrencies and their usage might fall into that, or how it might not fall into that. Either one of you. Either one of you.
So let me just start by explaining on a very basic level that there is an Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2010. Anti-money laundering itself has a pretty complicated definition because it involves steps. But just to give you a basic idea, the idea is that you have proceeds of crime. In some ways, you could even say proceeds of untaxed income, which you try to introduce into the formal banking system or the formal economy by whitening in it, as they say, by introducing layers which prevent the detection of that crime. So, for example, the classic money laundering would be that I sell drugs, I make money from drugs, and then I take all that black money, as they say, and I pump it into a naan ki dukaan, sabzi ki dukaan, gosht ki dukaan, laundry, matlab jo bhi hai, and you turn that black money into the income of that business because it's all money, it's all cash based, it's not documented, not recorded. So kisko kya pata hai ki 20 lakh kamaya aapne ya 2 lakh kamaya aapne, and
Right.
that money is then becomes the proceed of that business rather than the proceed of the drugs. And so when you go to a bank and you deposit that money in the bank, it is now white money because
White
now
money.
it is the money of that business, not the money of that original crime. Now, when I've done that, I can then utilize that money to do whatever I want. And therefore, the banks are required to not only check who I am, what my business is, what my income is, and where this money came from, particularly if it's very large. Now, when you look at money laundering from that perspective, money laundering is anything. I could do the same with dollars, rupees, gold, diamonds, oil. I mean, anything can be effectively laundered. But obviously, the most classic form is currency. There is a misconception that Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is inherently money laundering. If anything, that's not true at all, because if I give Salman and Ahmed 1,000 rupees each, no one has seen that 1,000 rupee transaction. No one knows कि मेरे 2,000 रुपए कहाँ से आए. No, it's a completely, confidential transaction. But if I send each of you 1,000 rupees worth of Bitcoin, that's actually tracked, that's monitored. There's actually a traceable transaction. So the idea that somehow Bitcoin makes it worse is actually very strange to me, at least. I don't know if either of you have seen how this argument stands up that somehow Bitcoin is next to money laundering.
I guess we can only find out once you send me that 1,000 rupees worth of Bitcoin.
No, I thought थोड़े से Bitcoin बढ़ा ले मैं, so
1,000 Bitcoin.
1,000 Bitcoin, but Bitcoin would be a good example. So I think Altaf, you've hit the nail on the head as far as what money laundering is. or the legislation around anti-money laundering and CFT, right? So that's absolutely fine. I think the real question perhaps is what has been on the news cycle around Bitcoin in the last week as well, where ransomware was basically paid in the
Right.
form of Bitcoin, and uh, interestingly, FBI has been able to track the key, which actually endorses your exact point that they were able to identify exactly the individuals who were behind it. And there was a very interesting debate that has been happening, especially on formal media. The conversation is this: that the original perception was, which I guess what you were referring to, is that inherently anybody who transacts on crypto is trying to do that because they want to evade detection as far as their wealth and assets are concerned. However, having people being apprehended for a criminal offense that they committed, irrespective of the currency and the mode of payment that they receive, actually provides a certain amount of safety, right? So if you are if the organized crime is not able to use a lot of these cryptocurrencies as a mean of exchange, it actually drains a lot of negativity out of this or conversation, and it is good for the overall ecosystem. And therefore I personally took that as a very positive development. But yeah, it reduced the value of Bitcoin yesterday. But yeah, that's so.
I want to.
Please carry on.
I was just gonna say I want to completely endorse what Ahmed is saying, because we could have this conversation in 2 weeks and news will have developed again. So it's strange how
Agreed.
quickly this is all moving. But it's interesting. There's currently a global tension, right? On the one hand, Bitcoin blockchain is trying to decentralize, and people are afraid of that decentralization, and that obviously conjures up images of money laundering and corruption and whatever. Um, on the other hand, you have the seven richest countries in the world, the G7, looking to centralize even more tax reporting and income of the world's largest companies. So right now, there's this battle globally taking place. That governments want more tax, want more income, want more raw reporting. They don't want offshore tax havens. They don't want multinationals cheating on their reporting and tax. By using different countries. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. And I'm not sure who's going to be the winner as such. But I will admit that I've been very impressed by how Bitcoin has been progressively getting stronger and bigger despite all of these headwinds.
So my last question before the session ends is: let's say there is someone who uses loopholes in the legal system to operate in the cryptocurrency space. How do you guess do these people do so?
And just as you want the answer,
Please, a disclaimer:
Ahmed's
do not
internet
try this at
restores.
home or anywhere.
I mean, look, if people do activities that are illegal, it's illegal. Full stop.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it means that they can be stopped at any moment. They can be caught at any moment. So it's not a case of how do they do it. It's a very big risk that they're taking with their business and their livelihood and their lives. It's not recommended, obviously. And
No,
and
my
and I'll
question
also.
is, yep. My question, let me be more specific, is without violating any um, violating any legal clause.
Well, no, I think that's a quick answer. Then, get in touch with me and Ahmed, and we'll help you structure it so that you can do it legally.
All right,
Because
so I
that
guess
is not a
there you
permanent
have it.
answer.
I guess then there you have it. Thank you, Altaf Saab. Thank you, Uzair Saab. We really look forward to having you in our future sessions, and hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks we will have you back. Given there is more progress in this space, we do see Pakistan heading towards a place where there's more acceptability of the different platforms that different cryptocurrencies have to offer. So looking forward to meeting you both again. Once again, pleasure meeting you both.
Sounds good.
Thank you so
Sounds
much.
good. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Khuda Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum.